What's a thing that is dangerously close to collapse that you know about? Story 1. The Florida citrus industry, specifically oranges. There is a fungus that is spreading and infecting groves across the state. Unfortunately, we have no way to kill the fungus. The only solution is to cut down all citrus trees within a certain radius of an infected tree. Many farmers are choosing to sell their farm rather than try to start all over. Story 2. The young childcare industry. Increased regulation to make facilities safer, a very good thing, had the unintended consequence of increasing costs for owners. You now need more teachers who have training and certification, not to mention the patience and stamina, to work with young kids all day. The pay is comparable to fast food without the benefits. Owners have to find a way to pay teachers enough to retain them while keeping costs down, so parents can afford to send their kids. It's damn near impossible without an infusion of government investments. Story 3. Literally all infrastructure in North America. The majority of underground infrastructure, pipes, water lines, sewer systems, has been completely ignored in terms of maintenance, and has been totally ignored in terms of budgeting replacing the assets. There are towns that have coming bills of 10s, 100s of millions, not even mentioning larger cities, that have saved approximately 0% of the required amount by constantly pushing out the lifetime estimation of the assets. Lots and lots of bills are coming due shortly, if the engineering estimates are accurate, and very few towns have saved anything for this scenario. We're basically living in a world where no one wants to be the person to say that we need to save money for long-term planning, and instead, everyone hopes things don't fail while they're leading and they can pass the buck. Story 4. The Ogallala Aquifer. You know how Kansas and Nebraska are known for essentially being endless fields of wheat and corn? Well, they do that by drilling wells to one of the world's largest aquifers deep under the Midwest. There isn't enough consistent rainfall in those areas for all those crops, so well water makes up the difference. But we're draining it, and it can't be replenished. Once it's drained, it's Dust Bowl 2.0 and no more large-scale farming in the Midwest. Story 5. The Garisenda, one of 2 remaining 12th century towers in Bologna, Italy. I saw them in April. It looks pretty ridiculous, to be honest. They have the area blocked off by some shipping containers because that tower's probably going to fall any day. It looks like there are some half-hearted restoration attempts happening, but no idea what their plan is. Story 6. There's a waste product of burning coal called fly ash. We use it in concrete. It makes the concrete better and cheaper. Nobody is building new coal power plants, and old ones are shutting down. It's getting harder and harder to source the ash. If we have to source it from far away like China, the transportation costs erase the cost saving. We can get the same concrete with just cement and added chemicals, but it's more expensive. In 10 years, we probably won't be using it at all. It's a really minor thing that will have far-reaching consequences. Architects and engineers will probably look at ways to reduce concrete in their buildings as the costs increase. It's not likely to impact residential, but big downtown architecture is sure to be affected. Story 7. Without human intervention, your local energy grid is only about 6 to 24 hours away from complete collapse, depending on how greedy the utility company is in terms of automatic backups. The electricity grid will likely fail first and within hours. Other energy sources like city heat or natural gas will take longer because those rely less on active human inputs. You remember in the Last of Us TV show how Nick Offerman is in a Home Depot? The power goes out and he remarks, "That was fast." That bit was much more accurate than anyone not involved in utilities would ever care to know about. Story 8. Lots of things according to our collapse. Personally, I live in a city called Lowell, MA, and there's the Rourke Bridge built 40 years ago that was meant to be temporary. Honestly, it reminds me of those horrible, scary bridges you've seen over rivers in Siberia or some other place in Central Asia. It's loud and bumpy, and you can feel the whole thing sway because it gets 25,000 cars crossing it every day. Not only that, you can actually walk under it since there's a river walk pathway it connects to, and you can see rusted sections just rotting away. About 6 months ago, a truck crossed it and a panel on the surface somehow seesawed up into the gas tank. The truck made it across, but not before losing probably 80 to 100 gallons of diesel onto the bridge and into the river below. The river had a marshy, swampy area near the bridge, and you could see the fuel slick eddying and collecting into that area. I can't imagine much survived underneath. I'm sure a lot of fish eggs and small aquatic animals died down there. The city, state, and feds have known this bridge needs replacing for decades, and they know about the rust and rot, but they continue to say that it will last for now. Don't they always say that, though? There is a plan to make a new one next to it, but it won't be done until 2028, which we all know means it'll probably drag on into 2029, 2030, etc. I honestly don't think it will last that long. Story 9. The food chain. I'm still amazed no one is talking about the fact that insect biomass has declined by 47% and abundance declined by number 61. 5% over the last 35 years. In some areas, it's measured 75% decline in a single generation. This insect apocalypse is very bad. Don't just take my word for it. Indeed, most biologists agree that the world has entered its sixth mass extinction event, the first since the end of the Cretaceous period 66 million years ago, when more than 80% of all species, including the non-avian dinosaurs, perished. Story 10. Publicly traded companies constantly being like, we did good, not great. More money next quarter. Oh, that's good, not great. Even more money next quarter. In the 4 years I've been with my company, my production quota has tripled and it's unsustainable. Every quarter has to make more money than the last, otherwise it's failing. This is almost every single publicly traded company. Corners being cut, profits maximized, employees compromised. It's endlessly happening. Story 11. Housing prices along the coast in Florida. Most of the state is barely 3 feet above sea level, and flooding is getting worse and worse every year. In 50 years, sea level is going to be much more inland than it is now, and no amount of beach restoration is going to help it. Story 12. IT knowledge. There are several factors at work here. Colleges are mostly a few years behind trends, if not more. So a lot of recent grads are way behind from the gate. Most colleges are now just shills for business licenses called degrees. You need this license to be allowed to have an entry job, and they know it, and charge whatever the market can bear. Pearson VUE has seized a huge amount of this space, which just adds to the cost, and tries to enforce certification tracks with government contract specs and all sorts of inroads. The cash cow of graduating college with 6-figure jobs waiting for them is mostly gone. The junior roles have been outsourced overseas and have been replaced with people with multiple hats. There are very few middle roles, so the track of going from junior to senior has a huge gap that keeps getting wider. The senior roles are starting to age out. Many went into management and some are retiring. Knowledge and experience is getting lost. Companies relying on technology to survey are cutting technology costs as a cost center because of the pressure of rising capitalism always producing value year to year. Thus, they send more jobs overseas and senior roles become too costly to maintain. We are incurring a lot of debt in aging infrastructure, and it is no different. There are systems operating high-cost operations in factories, transportation, and utilities that haven't been upgraded in decades, and some of the people who knew how it all worked are dying off. Eventually, there won't be enough senior roles to teach your younger people anything, and there will be a cascading series of knowledge gaps in current infrastructure, leading to huge failures. People say that kids today know computers, but they really don't. Most only know GUI and how to operate an iPad, not what makes the iPad work under the hood or how the internet works. Story 13. The UK criminal justice system edit for any non-Brits passing through. The new GVT has had to announce it's releasing prisoners early because it's got no space for incoming suspects on remand and new convicts. The last GVT shut like half the courts. The remaining ones are falling apart and understaffed. There aren't enough judges, so there's a 2-year backlog of serious cases. The junior end of the profession are so poorly paid, they've been on strike repeatedly. And let's not forget the police have basically stopped investigating shoplifting and other smaller crimes. This after 14 years of the law and order party being in power. Thank goodness the former chief prosecutor is now prime minister, so maybe there's a hope of fixing it. Story 14. Cardboard baler at work. It's got a 3/4 inches pin that keeps the door mounted to the baler structure itself. Decades of use has left said pin warping, so that there's now a visible gap at the top, while the bottom is still fairly close to where it should be. It no longer closes unless you slam it shut full force, and even then it's 50/50ths as to whether it'll shut or just bounce off the catching ledge at the bottom. One of these days, something's going to give out on that thing. Story 15. Factual information on the internet. There's a churn of AI-created content that's being taken as fact and used as the basis for new articles and content. Sifting through information to validate it is already too much effort for many and will only become more difficult. Story 16, the Amazon. To some degree, it generates its own weather patterns, with the vast amounts of water evaporated into the atmosphere from leaves. Deforestation is putting it close to a tipping point where it can no longer maintain those patterns. Once reached, the feedback loop is likely irreversible. Random safety tip. First dates with someone you don't already know and trust should always be someplace public with cameras like a coffee shop. Trust your gut if something feels off. Story 17. The education system. We have maybe 10 more years before a whole section of teachers retires, and then we're absolutely screwed. 50% of teachers quit within the first 5 years, and that statistic is much higher for SPED teachers. We aren't going to have anyone to work in the schools. Get ready for your kids to be taught by an online program with a person who babysits 50 kids at one time and has no training. It's going to get bad fast, even faster in bad union states. And if you have a kid with a lot of support needs, truly, I don't know what they'll do. I work with that population, and we currently are missing 2 teachers, and 3 others are on emergency permits. It's a huge problem and keeps getting worse because the pay is so bad that no one wants to work with these students. I went to the hospital on Friday from a bite from a student, truly a manifestation of his disability, who desperately needs a 2-1, but the district is making it impossible. I barely get to teach because I'm putting out fires all day. Story 18. A lot of subscription services, not just like streaming services. I'm talking about the big corporate software subscriptions. I work in tech, and there's a very real panic going on at a lot of these companies because they built their entire network and service at a loss, funneled hundreds of thousands of investor dollars into a product with the idea that they would raise the price after and make it all back after getting a foothold. But here's the thing. The cost of running a live service program is much higher than just selling a license and letting people install the program and use it locally. You need servers. You need virtual machines, not to mention the person-hours difference between occasional software updates of regular software and a live service. So not only do they have to pay back that loss leading, they also need to make enough to keep up with running the service. They get in and they spread as far as they can. They reach every possible customer. They do what they planned on and jack the price now that they have dedicated users, but it's not enough. There just aren't enough customers to ever actually make the money needed to pay back their loans and run the company. Either your product is too niche or there's too much competition, or in some cases you are literally selling to every potential customer and it's still not enough to pay back your loss leads. And by the time they realize this, they can try raising prices. But at this point, some other company is going to be in the lose money, get customers phase, doing the same thing you are. And if you raise the price again this quickly, you're going to breach the trust thermocline. And the customers you do have are going to jump ship, and you'll make even less money. A lot of companies jumped on the software as a service train that was so successful for Microsoft and Adobe. But the thing is, they already had a shit ton of money to throw at projects. They could loss lead and just eat the losses. Smaller companies don't have that luxury. But they made it seem so lucrative and easy that thousands of companies are slowly hemorrhaging themselves to death trying to replicate it. Story 19. You will no longer own the vehicle you purchase. I believe that electric vehicles are the way of the future, but manufacturers of cars, trucks, tractors, boats, etc. have been restricting access to necessary diagnostic and repair information for a couple decades now, and it's only going to get worse unless we fight for right to repair legislation. Story 20. I feel like the U.S. Postal Service has less than 20 years left. Our city delivers all the Amazon packages, but they're building their own facility, and within a year or two might be delivering all their own parcels. I feel like without the Amazon, we'll have about 30% more carriers than we need. Factor in first-class mail, being just a fraction of the overall mail, the death of newspapers and magazines, online bill paying, email, free long-distance calling with cell phones, and the extremely low rate charged for shipping standard mail. I personally no longer buy presents and pay $20, $40 for shipping when I can just order off Amazon and have them shipped directly for free. I don't see as many people waiting in the lobby. There's just no aspect that suggests a future. Story 21. The red supergiant star, Betelgeuse. It's speculated to soon be going or have already gone supernova, but the light hasn't yet reached us. It's too far away to harm the planet directly, but it will shine brighter than the moon for a year when the light reaches Earth, casting its own shadows even. Wild animals tend to use the moon to help them navigate, and scientists are concerned that this supernova could confuse them and end up disrupting the ecosystem. Story 22. The Los Angeles Court Reporter System, among many other county services like the health department. You can add several county IT systems to that list. Court reporters went home in 2020, and most of them just never came back. There is such demand for court reporters that they now start at $100K a year with signing bonuses. Except they still can't hire enough qualified people. The problem being that they were a very important part of the justice system in Los Angeles. Many courts don't allow electronic recordings as accurate portrayals of court discussions. In some probate and misdemeanor courts they do, but all others need a court reporter. If a judge rules against you, a properly created court transcript is needed to appeal your decision. Those aren't being given out in many cases any longer, and cases can't be delayed indefinitely. No transcript, no appeal. No appeal means serious constitutional violations. Story 23. The Colorado River's water levels are dropping consistently and dropping fast. The Hoover Dam eventually won't be able to make electricity. There's so much that relies on the Colorado, and eventually it's all going to fall apart. So much farming, several major cities, tens of millions of people. They're either going to have to relocate or start importing water from elsewhere. On top of that, 53% of aquifers in the U.S. are losing water. Story 24. The Canadian healthcare system is teetering on the edge of total collapse. No one I know has or can see a doctor. My elderly relatives are being dropped by their doctors regardless of health issues. They've closed every mental health facility and walk-in clinic in our city of over 600,000 people. They are telling people not to come to the emergency room unless you are actually at risk of permanent injury or have a life-threatening injury. If we get sick, we are dead. Countless billions are flowing into the system, and we are getting absolutely nothing out of it. All three levels of our government are pointing their fingers at each other saying, "Fix it," while we get left behind. They are clearly downplaying the issue to stave off mass protests at this point. I truly believe the outcome of this crisis will define the next generation of Canadian history, and we are going 100 km/h in the wrong direction. Story 25, the permafrost. Locked within the permafrost is so much methane, aka cow farts, that if we start to see even more melt and release that methane, we will get a runaway effect. And we're already seeing entire villages in Alaska and Russia be destroyed from the permafrost melting underneath them. Story 26. Our satellite systems thanks to the Kessler effect. The Kessler effect suggests that when the amount of space debris in low Earth orbit reaches a certain level, it will trigger a cascade effect in which this debris will be constantly colliding and breaking up to multiply the amount of debris. Some believe this was already set in motion when two satellites collided in 2009 and created hundreds of thousands of pieces of debris. Plus, collisions resulting in space debris are becoming more frequent. The implications of this are huge. If this debris multiplication continues unchecked, it could severely hinder future space exploration and wipe out satellite use. Story 27. Housing. There is legitimate collapse coming in 2025 to 2026. During the height of COVID, no one was borrowing, so rates bottomed out. The people that had money, people not limited by COVID restrictions, nurses or other professions that got a lot of OT, truckers working through the supply chain issues, etc., could get mortgages for very little. Banks knew it wouldn't last forever, so they were throwing around adjustable rate mortgages like candy, but keeping fixed rate mortgages relatively normal. So a lot of people got ARMs, either as a refinance to a lower rate or as a purchase. A lot of these loans were approved with OT pay and above average income factored in, and this was often required to get people under debt-to-income ratios. For the buyers, because real estate was so fucked during COVID, people were buying over the appraised value, often without inspections. At best, banks were lending 100% of the appraised value of the property, so if the selling price, after bidding wars and whatnot, was $50K over value, that had to be paid out of pocket, wiping out any savings. Because sellers were often stipulating no inspection or refusing to address anything that came up on the inspection, a lot of houses were sold with problems. So now you've got someone with a 100% loan-to-value home with wiped out savings, and the foundation is cracked, or the roof is leaking, or the plumbing is going. They don't have the cash to pay it, and they don't have the equity to do a HELOC. So they paid for repairs on credit or just didn't fix it. And because home values spiked too much in 2020 to 2022, insurance rates and property tax bills spiked. Those increases get paid as the escrow portion of your monthly payment. If your insurance goes up $1,400/year and your taxes go up $1,000/year, which is totally plausible, that's a $200/mo increase. And these loans are ARMs, meaning the rate will adjust. There are limits on how much they can increase at one time, and limits for life of loan increases, but it's still an increase. Someone on a 2-wire or 3-wire ARM is probably looking at their second increase in the next year or two. People with 5-wire ARMs are coming up on their first adjustment. Those rates will go up. No one's ARM is staying the same, much less going down. So you've got people with escrow increases due to tax and insurance increases, and principal interest payments increase due to ARM adjustments. You're going to have a lot of people with payments going up $500-700/MO. And that COVID OT pay isn't around anymore. Nurses that were getting 50 plus HR/WK are getting 34. Trucking loads have dropped. Extra funds to school for COVID-era programs is drying up. So you've got people making less than they were 4 years ago at a time when their mortgage payments are going up and deferred maintenance that they knew was an issue at purchase is catching up to them. People literally will not be able to afford their mortgages. There's going to be a major housing crash in 2025 to 2026, and it was set in motion in 2020 and has been ticking down since. Story 28. The online revenue market, not just influencers, but ads in general. There has never been a proven ROI. Right now, most of it is an estimate. I was listening to a podcast where they said Ernst & Young was hired to do forensic accounting on money spent to AdWorks, and 15 cents out of every dollar just disappears. Nobody has a clue where it goes, not even Google. And more data is being collected on real returns, and it's not lining up. Story 29, Rancho Palos Verdes. Did you know that part of Los Angeles is actively dropping into the sea? As in, the land is moving 12 inches per week, and the power company shut off electricity to 140 homes last week because they deemed it too dangerous to visit. Story 30, Modern Civilization. Back in the 70s, there was an MIT study, including a mathematical simulation, that predicted the end of modern civilization in or about 2040. Among the things predicted in this study was increasing climate change impacts, reduced access to natural resources, growing economic inequality, etc. Basically, all of this and more would be symptomatic systemic collapse, all driven by overpopulation in a major consumer age. One of the more interesting predictors would be skyrocketing prices in the second decade of the 21st century. Sound familiar? Essentially, this all leads to the gradual collapse of human society, industry, and population. Falling fertility rates suggest we are actually experiencing some degree of this. In the end, we end up with what is called limits to growth, LTG, which I don't fully understand, but it sounds kind of like diminishing return scaled against population. It means we're right fucked. Honestly, I believe that the vast majority of things being discussed in this thread are indicative of and symptomatic of gradual societal collapse. BTW, this study estimates a similar population, technological level, and quality of life of the 19th century during the 22nd century. So this has been real fun. Story 31. A lot of jobs thanks to AI. More regular people are using it while managers are pushing for the tech to be deployed to be trialed. Most don't know. Yes, it can save time and money, but you keep using it at work. It'll get better and improve. Your bosses will notice, so expect layoffs in the future and more folks struggling to find roles. The wealthy board won't care about feelings. Pockets will get deeper, more profits, less wages to pay. But those clever enough to maintain AI, well, they will be dancing, but doubt they'll get a good cut out of it either, like any tech. Story 32. Not really a big deal, but sales companies. Folks often heard how restaurants start and fail all the time. It's like 80% of restaurants close within their first 5 years. But the sales industry, home remodeling, B2B, etc., is starting to see them close down at rates similar to restaurants. Main reasons are customers are wising up to shady tactics used by these groups and are less inclined to let them in the house or buy anything. Good salespeople are unlikely to work for these companies. These companies typically rely on younger, foolish workers to come work for them. Young folks, namely Gen Z, don't tolerate that shit and don't take the job or quit shortly after. As a result, these companies can't make the sales they need because of smarter buyers or can't get enough salespeople because the veterans see through the BS and younger people don't like the sales industry. Story 33. The creative industries, movies, music, games are all going to change. Want to hear Bohemian Rhapsody by Motley Crue? Then just ask for it. Want to play Tomb Raider set in Japan? Then request it. Want to see Fast and Furious 15 starring Burt Reynolds and Paul Walker? It's yours. We are about 2 or 3 years away from this. Story 34. Dams. I'm not sure why alarm bells aren't already ringing. Most lakes in the U.S. are artificial lakes created by sediment dams. Most of these were made in the early 20th century and do not hold up to current design code. They are incredibly expensive to rehabilitate, and ownership of many of them are contested because no one wants to pay to fix them. I worked at a company specializing in dam rehabilitation, and in my 2 years there designed 15 dam rehabilitations for different HOAs. None of them will be built because of cost politics and will eventually fail. Story 35. I don't know about dangerously close to collapse, but I'd be shocked if universal meals, free lunches for all students, lasts long-term in the states that implemented it. California specifically. They had surplus funds post-COVID that they used to implement universal meals, but admitted they only had enough to fund universal meals for about 3 years. Unless they move tax money around, which they may have, they'll be running out of money here soon. Would be a disaster since everyone has now come to expect free lunches. I think they're banking on them passing free meals for all on the federal level, which is a discussion for sure, but ungodly expensive to execute, so we shall see. Story 36. Our education system is not prepared for the effectiveness of AI. The way that traditional grading schemas have been used to measure academic merit in the past are rendered irrelevant even now, since all assignments can be completed with significantly little effort. Acquiring an academic degree has honestly never been easier. I suspect this will be a major concern in the next couple of years. Story 37. Learned in an oceanography course about the possible future collapse of the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC. For those who don't know, it's a large system of ocean currents in the Atlantic Ocean, driven by differences in temperature and salinity, which play a crucial role in regulating Earth's climate. It transports warm, salty water from the tropics to the North Atlantic, where it cools, sinks, and then flows back south at deeper levels. The AMOC is vital for distributing heat globally, influencing weather patterns and supporting marine ecosystems. Essentially, changes or disruptions to the AMOC can have far-reaching impacts on climate, including shifts in temperature and precipitation patterns. Given Earth's currently shifting climate, we're looking at a positive feedback loop. As the climate influences more change in the AMOC influences more change on the climate. If true, we're talking different weather patterns. Places once cooled are now hotter and vice versa, both sea and land natural ecosystems and farms alike becoming destroyed, and more. Story 38. Chocolate is in a lot of trouble. Bad harvests, drought, etc., etc. The price of a ton of cocoa is now almost double, $2,400, $4,000. Was less than 18 months ago with a predicted 4x to 7x rise in the next 18. Most people like chocolate. You may not be having cheap chocolate much longer. Story 39, the Atlantic Ocean flow that circulates warm water and keeps the northern hemisphere abnormally warm. In less than 50 years, Europe and the American East Coast are going to be considerably colder year-round when that flow stops. It's going to be a massive human migration never before seen. And meanwhile, the waters rising is going to see a massive migration from southern areas in the U.S. and Asia. Absolute unprecedented human nightmare. Story 40. Pretty minor compared to the things posted here. But in my job, IT, I see stuff like small businesses relying on Windows Server 2003 or SBS still rocking on-prem Exchange and really old software to go with it. IMO. It is not that terrible for a company to have old software or technology if it's possible to just put it inside a virtual machine or container and run on top of a normal up-to-date infrastructure or in the cloud, especially if it's in-house software that's fully documented and tested and works, and supporting it is someone else's problem and not your job. But for a small company with 10 employees whose server is an old Dell PowerEdge tower in a dusty closet, and they aren't using Hyper-V, it's just one server, OS, running on bare metal, and there is no off-site backup or practical way to do a disaster recovery, it's a ticking time bomb. And then you throw unsupported ancient software into the mix. For example, very old but mission-critical forms that were custom-made in FileMaker or Peachtree accounting way back in 1999 by an employee who retired and then passed away. Then what happens when it barfs up some obscure error message? Unless you can find a random forum post from 2003 where some guy fixed it and shared how there really is nobody around to save you. Also, the truth is, you just can't host your own email anymore unless you are really motivated or have a unique technical need to. Another thing is that there aren't going to always be techs available who are skilled in dealing with the problems of a 20-year-old system. Story 41. My family, not my direct family luckily, but my aunt's family. My guy cousin behaves like a golden child when he isn't. He can't handle my sister receiving the finest bit of help or praise while he gets everything since he and his son work on the farm. It's coming to a head now. He managed to take something his sister said out of context enough to take it as an insult to his youngest son. Oldest son decided not to invite her to the wedding. She found out by asking my sisters if they got their invitations yet, and they had. My aunt is too afraid to do anything. My uncle has health issues. No one in the wider family is happy with this. If I'd known about this before I RSVP'd to the wedding, I wouldn't have gone, but I found out a few days before the bridal shower. My direct family is thinking of adopting the affected cousin as a sister, adding her to our family vacations. We already consider my aunt a second mom after the loss of our own mom. I have a feeling when Guy cousin finds out things are going to go crazy. Story 42. And our old dining table has long since seen its best days. Every family gathering turns into an ordeal when that table begins to wobble and creak with every movement. With each bite of dinner, the chair on which one sits begins to play the role of not only a chair, but also a musical instrument. One family member even joked that if you listen closely, you can hear the melody of Moonlight Sonata. Eventually, this table became not only a place to eat, but also a source of constant fun and noise that everyone used to put up with until they saved up enough money to replace it. Story 43. Topsoil. We owe our entire existence to a 5 to 10-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. Industrial agriculture is stripping the dirt of its nutrients, and we are not practicing sustainable agriculture here. Some areas are projected to be completely stripped within the next 5 decades. I'm honestly more terrified of this than of climate change, yet very few people outside of ag spaces seem to be talking about it. Story 44. Rural healthcare in the U.S. Only the most ruthless and money-driven healthcare orgs are stable in this environment, leading to consolidation in the field. As the players consolidate, rural hospitals are at extreme risk as they don't make much money. I know this sounds ludicrous considering how expensive care is in the U.S., but nearly all of that money is finding its way into giant insurers and other non-provider entities, leaving the actual healthcare providers holding the bag. Story 45 depends what you mean by close, but lots of things. Physically, the sandhills of Nebraska were free-moving dunes the last time the planet was this hot, so it's probably just a matter of years till they destabilize again and start swallowing up farms and towns. The education system, economic system, housing, media, healthcare, democracy all seem to be in the process of collapse as we speak, with maybe some temporary reprieve for some of these if the next national election in U.S. doesn't go the wrong way, and if we manage to somehow avoid a civil war and/or constitutional crisis, and we have military conflicts that are pretty consistently threatening to widen to regional wars or beyond. As far as I've seen, AMOC and even the whole Hadley cell system could collapse pretty much at any time. Collapse of insect populations and much of the rest of complex life on the planet, especially plants and animals not directly cultivated by humans for humans, seem to be well into collapse/6th extinction. Story 46. My job. It's a decent company if you're in the important group. Office side, we are good. We get raises and we get treated well. Manufacturing has gone 2 years without raises, no acts of appreciation, and all around being ignored. I used to be manufacturing but worked my way into the office. Personally, I have nothing to complain about, but I hate how the other guys get treated. I've heard a lot of talk that we're about to have numerous walkouts. If majority of them leave, we are screwed. Story 47. The Panama Canal. The canal itself is above sea level and requires a system of separated sections that each get pumped and flushed with fresh water to raise the level in that section, allowing the ship to pass. The levels of available water to pump the canal with are getting extremely low. The wait times at the Panama Canal are getting longer, and the prices to pass are increasing. It is not uncommon to bribe officials a few $100,000 to skip the line, the beginning of the end of the Panama Canal. Really more the late middle of the end. Story 48. Compared to pre-industrial times, almost every fished fish population is down by 90 to 99%. In the early 1800s, when record-keeping began, a fishing vessel could catch in a day what we now catch in a year for some species. Insect populations in general are on the decline. There are 2 more well-known publications about it. One used windshield impacts and found dramatic declines. Another surveyed German nature preserves. Over 50% decline in population found. The insects are disappearing and we don't know much. Just like fish populations, some marine mammals aren't keeping up in spite of impressive international cooperation. After glacial progress since the 1980s, the North Atlantic right whale population is dropping again. Every single individual matters. There are only approximately 360 left. The vaquita porpoise, native to Baja California, is unlikely to survive. Its home waters are plagued by the Chinese medicine trade. A 2022 study estimated fewer than 10 were left. The most recent estimated 6, 8 to 9, 11. And of course, hopefully the most well-known example, corals. I recently moved to Florida for college. I was saddened to hear from a professor that the Keys have corals, but no longer what would be considered reefs. Coral populations have basically already collapsed, but it can and probably will get worse. Story 49. The Amazon rainforest is approaching a critical tipping point, with concerns that it could be close to collapse due to various environmental pressures. Deforestation, climate change, and the effects of fires are accelerating the degradation of the rainforest. Scientists warn that if deforestation reaches 20 to 25%, the forest could transition from a tropical rainforest into a savanna-like ecosystem, significantly altering biodiversity, water cycles, and carbon storage capacity. Currently, Deforestation has affected around 17 to 18% of the Amazon, which means the tipping point may not be far off. This collapse would have profound consequences both regionally and globally, affecting climate patterns, biodiversity, and the livelihoods of indigenous communities. Story 50. The ER. We're overfilled, understaffed, have no way to discharge psych patients, geriatric patients, the ICU is always full, and the patients I can discharge have zero access to follow up. We're a safety net that keeps catching but has no way to decompress. I've taken care of horrifically sick patients for days when prior to COVID they would have gone upstairs in hours. Story 51. Trade jobs, kind of a non-tangible area, but lots of the current plumbers, electricians, HVAC, mechanics, etc., are in their late 50s or 60s. They don't have a lot of younger people getting into those careers to backfill for them when they eventually retire. People can make some damn good money working those jobs, but they aren't seen as glamorous and high profile and not encouraged, but they should be. Story 52. I worked for CNBC in the graphics department over a decade ago. I accidentally made an error in one of the numbers graphics. I don't remember exactly what, but it was a big deal. Thankfully, someone caught the error before it got to the control room. Later that day, I was called in by all the department heads and told to pack my things. So I guess I almost crashed the stock market. Story 53. The East Coast oceanfront condo market. Not uber-rich condo communities, but middle-class run-of-the-mill condos. Myrtle Beach, Jacksonville, Florida. Insurance rates are skyrocketing, and the condo associations can't afford 100% coverage for rebuilding policies. Many are buying policies for 80% rebuilding cost, and sellers can only sell to cash buyers or finance the buyer. I'm not sure how that plays out in the long run, but it sounds like a perfect time for rich investors to come in and take over entire condo communities and turn them into apartments or bulldoze them for luxury single family. Story 54. There's a hotel in my city that dates from the 1890s, but was abandoned in 2020 when COVID hit. A developer bought it and discovered one of the two surviving buildings, which are attached via a lean-to, did not have a foundation. Whoever built it in the 1920s simply hammered wooden beams into dry sand and filled any gaps between the stumps and the floor above with extra chunks of wood. These have since fallen away, leaving the floor with zero support. There's also a concrete walkway between the two buildings that was used as a service lane. The concrete panels have nothing holding them up because the steel beams that did rusted away due to lack of waterproofing. Demolition has started, though I'm not sure how it's progressing so far. Story 55, the Amtrak Bridge in NYC between Ditmars Boulevard and 23rd Avenue. Pieces of it have been falling off into the road for weeks, and citizens in the area have been putting caution signs around the area to warn pedestrians and drivers. It's extremely concerning to me, and I am bothered by the fact that last I checked, no immediate significant action was being taken to repair it, or at least close off sections of the road where debris is falling. Story 56. The daycare system in Germany. As of now, 480000 positions as a daycare teach nurse are vacant, and it'll be more and more. We've reached a point at which the working conditions are so bad that new staff members either don't stay post-job interview or quit within 1 year because there's nobody who could show them how to run that mill. This leads to the remaining members barely passing by even more, leading to a bad working environment. What also doesn't help is that most parents are not understanding but angry at the daycare for the current situation, and that the federal governments are also kicking down on the daycares. As we're speaking, daycare staff is on sick leave for 31 days/year, 10 more than average, and with that we have the highest count of sick leave in the country as professions go. Not only because often parents think that the child is too sick for vacation but fit enough for kindergarten, but also because of burnout, depression, and developed anxiety disorders. This shit show is not getting better but a new season. Story 57. In the UK, lots of schools and other large municipal buildings were made using RAC, reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete. It's concrete mixed with other crap and has air blased into it to make a lightweight panel filled with bubbles of air. It was in use from the big post-war building phase in 1950s until the 1990s housing boom. The problem is that when it gets wet, it starts to crumble under pressure. In case you didn't know, it rains a lot in the UK and buildings are heavy. It's not known how many residential buildings were made using RAC. Story 58. I'm not so sure how close to collapse my example is at this time, but it is certainly of growing concern which doesn't get enough attention. Humans today are pumping out groundwater, mostly for agricultural reasons, though not always, at an unprecedented rate never seen before. So much so that even entire cities are sinking in elevation. Case in point, Mexico City. It's the 4th most populated city in the world, but due to its over-reliance on groundwater pumping, The city is sinking at a rate of 40 centimeters or 15 inches every single year. And they aren't alone. There are other cities experiencing that too. BDTW. The world's groundwater pumping has become unsustainable, meaning pumped out at a faster rate than those water reserves could ever naturally replenish themselves. Not only that, but after its intended use, that water then gets introduced into the natural water cycle above ground as it evaporates, which must rain back down at some point. And when it does, that will most likely rain onto some body of water, since water covers over 70% of Earth's surface, thus contributing to rising ocean and sea levels. Go figure. But watering down the oceans like that will slowly dilute its salt content, salinity, over time. And its salinity is what power the ocean's currents which Earth relies on to pump pent-up heat from one part of the planet to the other. The fact that it's not brought up much among climate advocacy groups is very, very unfortunate. Everybody today just wants to focus their efforts towards CO2 being the primary bogeyman worthy of people's concern. And of course, nobody, and I mean nobody, not even Greta Thunberg herself, is batshit crazy enough to ever stigmatize groundwater usage as being a worrisome matter in front of an environmental panel of science experts. Story 59. Super heavy rain events caused by climate change will wash away crops and the soil they're growing in. Only weeds grow after that. Also, hotter weather accelerates the process of microbes breaking down organic matter in soil. That is why the closer to the equator, the less topsoil exists generally. The erratic climate will cause the range for plants to decline and reduce biodiversity. The various governments and NGOs will be devoting more and more of their resources to helping people hit by climate-related disasters. These are just some of the spiraling downward causes and effects of both extreme dependence on an economic system dependent on monetary and man-made material growth and petroleum. Story 60. Wouldn't be surprised if landscape arch at Arches National Park went down tomorrow. There's a fun video from a few years back that shows a huge chunk of it falling off from natural erosion. I show it to my third grade social studies class every year. When it goes, I hope it goes naturally, and I'll be glad that I got to see it in person several times before it went. Story 61. The bridge over Page's Ice Cream in Pittsburgh. Been there 100 years and the line for the shop runs right under the bridge. I always looked up and saw huge chunks of concrete missing and exposed rebar, and knew one of these days a concrete chunk is going to let loose when some massive freight train rolls over and smushes some unsuspecting person waiting in line for ice cream. Story 62. South Africa's power grid. Few, if any, countries have faced more brain drain than SA over the last 3 decades. All the older electricians and engineers are retiring or dying, and anyone smart enough to be taught how to keep the lights on has emigrated to London, New York, Sydney, etc. And even if they wanted to stay, the ANC and its main rivals are all corrupt racial spoils systems parties that interfere with Exxon's hiring, treating it as a jobs program rather than an electricity company. Story 63. No idea if it's true, but the logic is there. I was once told some of the cities in China will probably literally collapse in my lifetime. Reason being is that while modernized, they are ancient and have completely used up the water tables beneath the cities at this point. Now, with these modern cities, you now have a lot of weight on top of a void where there used to be something. Eventually, it will give out that will probably take out quite a few buildings. I think it's foolish to think that entire cities will sink like some modern-day Alexandria. But I could easily imagine some of the cultural sites that are ancient being swallowed up by sinkholes.